happy to be here. This is the second audience of Tea Party members that I've spoken to, and one of the greatest things about the Tea Party is that the principles of limited government and freedom under the rule of law really shine through whenever I talk to people one-on-one or in front of a group. When the Tea Party started, it was right after the introduction of legislation to kind of blow up, or government takeover of the healthcare industry, the centralized planning of a sixth of the economy. It was when cap and trade and Dodd-Frank and the bill that would have pretty much all hiring and firing decisions have to go to arbitration and basically be ratified by the government. It was after a stimulus bill that came after a couple years of very high spending. So it was really nice to see a organic movement developing that is really something I've never seen before. And maybe you guys have not seen it before, but it's really something that had a lot of libertarianism in it, but wasn't associated with a party at all. And that kind of empowered a lot of us to believe that there's something we can do to reverse the trend towards bigger government, to return us to the idea of freedom, both substantive freedom and freedom as the rule of law. So my life has kind of been a preparation for this race, not intentionally. I love freedom, I love economics, I love public policy, but that wasn't always my first love. I liked baseball and math and a lot of other things, but over the course of my career, educational and professional career, I realized that I really am passionate about freedom. And the reason is not so much that I want to do whatever I want to do, but because freedom is the core value in a political system that enables people to, not just to achieve self-worth and to develop their own autonomy, but also it enables people to interact with others, coordinate their lives with others. So libertarians kind of get a bad rap for being individualists, autonomous people, or atomic people. That's absolutely not the case. Classical liberals and libertarians think that when it comes to government, government must respect you as an individual and give you the freedom to live your lives how you see fit. Now, we are social animals. We are going to want to be in families and brotherhoods and sisterhoods. We're going to want to get together and, through volunteer work or through starting a business, work together to improve our lives. So this is not atomic individualism at all. It's exactly what America has achieved over 200 years, this enormous wealth and prosperity, and just one of the freest societies that has ever existed on the earth. So I ran 2 years ago in Northern Virginia for the state senate. I ran against Dick Saslaw, who's the Senate Majority Leader. And I ran as a Republican. And that was sort of like, dipping my toe in the water, seeing if I liked politics. But it was also an opportunity to present a different, what I saw as a different face of the Republican Party. But what I learned over the intervening couple of years is that I don't think the Republican Party in Virginia is friendly to liberty candidates, and I don't think it's particularly concerned with liberty itself. So when I had the opportunity talking to some people associated with the Libertarian Party who knew me from my race and knew that I stood for the principles that both parties, Republicans and Democrats, should be fighting for, and they suggested that this is a race that we'd like to have a candidate in. And I looked at who the candidates were, and I just thought it was a Hobson's choice. Two choices that you just would rather not vote. And I decided, yeah, let's do it. And that was sort of, that's how it started. And all I do is I go around and say what I believe. And, I've only been on the ballot for a month, And yet the polls have shown that people are listening and they want another candidate and they're willing to, they can only be pushed so far. This, we live in a two-party system, can only make you go so far before you say, forget about it. I'm not going to vote, or I'm going to vote for somebody who I believe in and that I can be proud of voting for. So I'd be happy to talk about particular issues and particular principles, but I think we should do that in the question and answer session. So we might as well start that now so we have as much time to do that.
Thank you, Rob. Please keep in mind, a recent survey showed 40% of Virginians, wanted another choice. 40%. Your questions, please keep them relevant to state issues that a governor would be elected to address. Fire away.
Yep.
As governor, how would you steer the state of Virginia off of federal monies to be self-sufficient, self-sustaining, and not dependent on the federal government as we are now? A good portion of our economy is dependent upon grants and also federal jobs that I think are necessary, but there is a dependency overall economically on federal dollars in the state of Virginia that I think we need to get away from.
Right. That's an excellent question. That should probably be one of the foremost things that gets talked about, especially at the debates. It was kind of not talked about in the first debate. I think something like 40% of the economy in Virginia is dependent either on direct federal outlays or on grants to the states and the programs that those provide, or employment and things like that. The federal spending has to come to an end. Something that can't continue on forever isn't going to continue on forever. There's going to have to be some belt tightening. So how does that affect us? Well, it affects us anytime an industry has to contract, it's going to cause joblessness and dislocations. How do we as a state prepare the economy to absorb those losses and move people into other jobs? Well, the only way to do it, the only successful way to do it with the flexibility that's needed, is to have an open and free economy, an open and competitive market in all industries that's based on the rule of law, and that anybody can come into and compete, and one that rewards value creation. So that little encapsulation of what I think we need to move to. It's very vague, but I'll unpack it. And it touches on a lot of things, which is regulation, taxes, state spending, how we decide how to spend on transportation, schools, etc. So first of all, open and competitive markets. Our regulations, occupational licensure laws, just general laws, all have the effect of inhibiting market freedom, economic freedom, and competition. There are so many ways in which, and we can talk about healthcare. I can talk about healthcare for like hours, and just if you look at, for example, the Certificate of Public Needs, which basically says that if you want to open a new radiological service, buy an MRI machine, you have to go to the Department of Health, State Department of Health, get a certificate of need before you can do any of that. You have to prove to them that there's a public need for such a service in the area. That is as ridiculous. It's absurd. Yeah, it's centralized planning. It's befitting of a Soviet republic. It's not. And what that does is it limits competition. It benefits market incumbents. It benefits large corporations. And the reason we have it is because those large corporations know that they can get that profit maximizing regulation put in place, so they expend money lobbying the government to do that. And so you have waste all around. You get higher priced healthcare, you get waste on lobbying, and then you get a lot of people who either can't get jobs, can't start a business because the cost of starting a business is so high. That decreases employment, and it has ripple effects throughout the economy. So, you know, we have a lot of really educated people who are working in the defense industry, who are working in law, who are working in all sorts of industries that are related to federal programs. If you have a free economy and federal spending starts to go down, people become idle, and others around the country, or entrepreneurs here, can start businesses. They see those idle workers who need to transition to jobs, and that presents an opportunity to hire people, so they'll open businesses and come here. But you can't do that if you have a closed economy, if you have a patronage-based rather than a rule of law-based economy. You can't do that if you have a place where entrepreneurs don't want to come or investors don't want to come. A Silicon Valley entrepreneur who went to college, you know, who knows where, or you know, a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs didn't go to college or dropped out, but you know, are they going to want to come here if they don't see us as an open society, not just in the marketplace, but also in our personal lives? Is the government ruling our personal lives? So, you know, a lot of people don't realize that affects the openness of markets as well as our economic laws. So my answer in the first instance is that we need to prepare our economy to be flexible and supple and able to absorb job losses in any industry, and that includes you know, energy. I mean, everything we do a lot of space stuff. We do a lot of you know, defense contracting, obviously, and a lot of the space contractors and defense contractors. We're going to see job losses with the cuts. So we need to have an open economy. Second thing is, I think that we should take every opportunity we can, and the governor has a bully pulpit of his own. You know, if you get somebody up there who can articulate principles and articulate them well, with the facts on his side and economic reasoning on his side, you can actually push back very hard against these boneheaded federal regulations. Doing it through the court system, that's fine, but you don't have the tools you have when you go before the public and you make your case directly. So I think we should use the bully pulpit to push back against those things. It's going to be difficult because it's sort of every industry, every aspect of federal spending, we've gone overboard. But it's also, you know, taking every opportunity to apply for example, Medicaid waivers, so that we can actually have a little bit more policy freedom at the state level. So what I would like to see is ideally the federal government returns power to the states over our public healthcare policy. But even if we don't do that, it would be nice to see them move Medicaid to a block grant program with state policy freedom. But even if we don't do that, it would be nice to get a waiver to construct a Medicaid program for the state that is cost effective and improves health outcomes. And so what I would do is look at the evidence, which suggests that it's better to, it saves money to focus on catastrophic care and catastrophic insurance rather than the comprehensive care where, you know, you get paid, you go to the doctor for anything and they reimburse the doctor. So focus on catastrophic care. The returns on investment in mental health are very high, so focus on that. And then, to some extent, have cash subsidies, which enable people to use the subsidies toward what they think is best suitable for their health needs. So that also increases sort of people's personal autonomy and freedom with the money that we're spending, the public money we're spending. So that's what I would like to see. And in every area of policy, whenever you have those opportunities to construct your own state-level program, I think we should take advantage of it. But ultimately, you know, if I'm elected, I think it changes everything, because this isn't just, oh, Rob goes to the governor's mansion and then he's just stuck in between the Republican and Democratic parties. No, now the Republican and Democratic parties realize they can't run a crony capitalist against an inconsistent, social, I don't know what the right word is, I don't want to say anything too pejorative, but you know, somebody who wants to rule your private lives. They actually have to realize that there is there's real competition out there for your votes. And they have to know that in 2015, 140 legislative seats are going to have a Libertarian competitor, right? 100 in the House and 40 in the state Senate. And you already see the convulsions in the Republican Party between Christie and Paul. You just have to imagine, like, if we can make a huge statement in how we vote this year, it can change not only our politics and our policy, but the parties that claim to own our votes. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question. But I mentioned that last part about changing the entire political game, because that's the only way you get a real decrease in federal spending. Because you know, the Republicans and Democrats are nibbling at the edges, if at all. Yes.
Our next governor is going to be a Democrat or a Republican. Do you truly believe there's no difference in the level of conservatism between Mr. McAuliffe and Mr. Cuccinelli? And who do you believe you're going to take votes away from when you run?
Well, I reject your premise. But it's, you know...
Well, I'd like to make a small, I'll bet $100 on it right tonight.
Well, so I know people talk about conservatism a lot, and I don't really know what that means. A lot of people use the word in different ways. A lot of it, you know, when they're talking economics, conservative seems to mean, you know, free market stuff. But then you see the conservatives not pursuing free market policies, and you know, free markets and economic freedom. It sounds a lot like freedom, but then it has nothing to do with freedom when the conservatives talk about, at least some conservatives talk about personal issues, private lives. So, and conservative, to me, I don't really see it as having, like being a philosophy other than, you know, resisting change. And that was fine if the institutions you have are consistent with freedom. Then yeah, be conservative. But if you have illiberal laws on your private lives, being conservative and resisting change on those laws is antithetical to freedom. And so, you know, I'm glad you mentioned gay marriage. I'm not in favor of court-sanctioned recognition. I strongly prefer doing it through the democratic political process. And all I'm asking for is putting it back to a vote. I mean, we did it in 2006. And, you know, Ken Cuccinelli says, the people have voted, and so I'm just defending the people. That's a total canard. You know, he wants to keep it this way, but he's using the people's voice as his sort of his shield. If that's really his shield, that this is what the people want, then he should have no problem at all putting it up to a vote again, right? And I don't see how you can argue against that. So all I'm asking for is putting it up to a vote again. And the fact that polls suggest that support and opposition have switched suggests to me that opposition to putting up to a vote is simply about using the Constitution, using law, using state, the government apparatus to impede social change. I mean, you can't argue that this social change is happening, and it's already happened actually, which is why I think it's important to remove institutional barriers to the change. A lot of conservatives like to say, oh, well, rights exist prior to the state, and I agree with that, but so do social institutions and religious institutions. I do not want to tell religions whom they can marry, whom they must marry. Religious institutions should be allowed to choose that for themselves, but do you use the state apparatus to keep the general society from recognizing these social changes? I don't think so. I think that's a matter of scope of government, rule of law, and just general freedom. Yes?
On the subject of social issues and where the government can step in and stuff like that, where do you stand on abortion? I know the Libertarian platform for this past presidential election said it's up to the mother and her conscience. But what, as a pro-life person, I think it's very hypocritical that, we talk about, where do you stand on it? I'll ask that.
I'm pretty sure the Libertarian Party platform was changed recently, within the last year, to say that it's, there's a lot of disagreement on it, and so the party no longer takes a position. I'm pretty sure that's what it says, but I might be wrong, because, I mean, I'm new to the party too. Or not too, but I'm new to the party. And, you know, I'm my own candidate. I'm not necessarily endorsing every word, but my understanding is the platform was changed. And the platform was actually changed a lot closer towards my view. My personal view of abortion is that it's a gruesome thing, and my wife and I are happily married with 2 kids because our first pregnancy was unplanned before we were married, and I told her that I don't want to have anything to do with an abortion. I will marry you and be the best husband, father you can be. I can be. But the pivotal question is a question of metaphysics. Like, you know, when does life begin, etc. And I just don't think that it makes sense when a society is so radically disagreeing on a question of metaphysics, which is prior to the question of politics, that you can actually use, I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's going to be effective to use criminal prohibitions to decide the matter. Now I know there's a lot of people who disagree, but that's my view, and it's partly the kind of prohibitionist mentality that I find problematic. That, you know, whether it's drug use or you know, any sort of morality issue, if you don't like it, then we don't try and use moral suasion in our private lives. We instantly now just go to the government and say, let's ban it. And I understand there's life at stake here, so I'm not minimizing that at all. But I'm saying that that government's role is not always to take what you think is immoral in the extreme and to make it as policy for everybody, even those who disagree with you. Now, you know, slavery. A lot of people talk about slavery and how, you know, if we kind of took the same issue with regard to slavery, then we, you know, it'd still be, well, no, we fought a civil war over it. I mean, this isn't something like, oh, you know, we stood up and we passed laws and we got rid of it. No, we fought a civil war over it. That's what it took. That's why things changed. So I just think that this is it's really bad. So the point is I am sort of I'm sort of agnostic on where the lines should be drawn, and I think the abortion issue is poisoning our political rhetoric. It's poisoning. It's radicalizing the parties, and so I just want to say, let's take 4 years out of our political lives on this issue. Work on it in your private lives. Go and talk to people. Try and move them via moral suasion. But let's focus on the issues that we can actually find agreement on. And, you know, we'll be around to fight it another day. So my position is basically, you know, let's not seek to change where the lines are drawn currently. Let's take 4 years off from it and focus on other issues. Yes?
I want to get us off of the social issues. That is not what is killing America. It is the federal government. And back to the first question, how do we get off the federal government teeth? It's killing the Commonwealth states' rights and every other state's rights also. So what is your plan for that? Should it be done gradually, all at one time? Do you raise taxes? Do you understand what the unfunded mandates are that we need to push back on? We need to say, federal government, go suck. All right?
Well, okay. So the first thing I would say is you can't just say, forget about social issues, because the social issues drive people away from the Republican Party, and it ends up with what? Democrat economic policy. That's a losing proposition if your view is economic policy. If you think economic policy is where government is really screwing us up, then you can't ignore the social politics. The direction that the Republican Party has gone in. But second of all, the problem is that there is no mechanism, no institutional mechanism at the state level to change or influence federal policy. The most you can do from an institutional, constitutional procedure aspect is to say, A, we're not going to implement your laws at the state level. You can't commandeer our state officers, so we're just not going to let anybody at the state level do it. But then what you get is just one of two things. One is the federal government will do it directly, or it will tax us and basically dangle that money in front of us and basically bribe us with our own money.
Yeah, if they didn't have that ability, we could do what we wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that there's a very strong argument for basically saying that you can't tax the tax that comes from the population of a state that doesn't want something like something like Medicaid. I mean, it's the federal government has so messed up healthcare in so many ways. And state government is also a cause of the problem, but the federal government is the principal agent in messing up the healthcare market. And the Medicaid expansion, I'll be the first to say that I would absolutely reject that. I mean, it's basically further federalization, and the money is going to dry up. It's not even like we're getting 90%, but who thinks that's going to last, right? So I think you should, whenever there's a program that needs to be done through the state mechanism, I would reject it. But the difficult part is getting rid of the programs that are bad for the economy that happen directly from the federal government to the individuals, and also not the subsidies and social programs, but the laws themselves that just mess up financial markets, they mess up insurance markets, they mess up all sorts of the housing market, obviously, monetary policy also. I think monetary policy is an overlooked one. Obviously, the state government has no say in what the Fed does, but this is something where a person who actually knows a lot of economics and law is in a prime position to go out and give an actual good argument against a lot of the stuff that the federal government is doing. The Republicans are incompetent at explaining why labor market regulations hurt the poor. They're incompetent at explaining why healthcare regulations drive up healthcare costs and don't improve healthcare outcomes. They don't know the language of economics. They don't even try to make the argument. People who don't agree with freedom aren't going to respond to appeals to freedom or conservatism. You need to talk their language, and I can do that because, well, for one thing, I've been doing that my whole life. The vast majority of my friends are very liberal. My wife started out as an Obama campaigner in 2008, but in 2012 she voted for Gary Johnson. And she has seen so much of exactly how, she grew up poor in Mississippi. She's a training doctor now. She sees the abuse of the system. She sees, looking back on her life, the ways that the welfare programs incentivized fatherless houses. The drug war, that's another thing that I have a huge problem with the conservative stance on that, and we can talk about it a lot. But how the drug war creates unemployable, not just unemployed, but unemployable people, how the school systems totally undermine any ability for the poor to escape poverty. And it's not just teachers' unions. I mean, there's so much to it.
War on poverty. We're really winning that one, aren't we?
Right, well, the war on poverty, I mean, so the issue there, you know, Republicans like to talk about how, you know, the rich are taxed too much, and they're the ones who create, you know, worthy job creation, blah, blah, blah. The people who have the highest marginal tax rate are often the poor, because as they make $1 more, they lose they lose some money in benefits. And if you look at that as a decrease in their take-home earnings, and you look at that as equivalent to a tax rate, sometimes it can be over 100%, depending on the situation, which, you know, programs and you know, whatever. There's so many, it's really hard to keep track and calculate that. But, you know, the social safety net is supposed to sit underneath somebody and catch them when they fall. It sits on top of people and keeps them down when they fall. And the, you know, you would like to see some generational changes that a poor family can, you know, the next generation can be the first to go to college or something, etc. But then our school systems are terrible, or even the ones that are good spend like twice as much as they need to. So, actually, I've forgotten what the original question was, but but the point is that you need somebody who can talk to, who can speak the language of people who will agree with you if only they knew just how bad our policy is. I mean, there have been studies that show that it's not that people are, you know, care about Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian ideology. It's that when they know more about the details of the actual policies, they become more libertarian. And there's only one reason. It's not ideology. It's not that our ideas are so much better, although I think they are. It's that our policy is so bad.
Let's get some more questions in. Major?
Let me see if I can get this put together right. Transparency is the word that we don't have, federal, local, no matter what part of government. That you will be involved in this if you're the governor. I attended a Board of Supervisors meeting last Wednesday, and I really wasn't aware of the way they operated. So there's a proposal by the chairman to, instead of using a quorum to conduct business, or as I understand it before, two supervisors could only speak and not include the public. So now what they want to do is use a quorum, which will be 4 in that case. Now, as I understand it, that's going to have to go to the state to be ratified or put into law. Now, even for people deciding what our county is going to do or not do without bringing it before the public, it really stinks to me. Major issue, but I thought they voted unanimously to do this. And now it will go this fall to the legislature and then eventually to your desk. Would you address this? Because transparency, our governor took Rolex watches, you know, all the stuff that he said was legal. That's BS. You know, when you accept that kind of, those gifts and then say the state does not have laws to address it. I mean, what do we do to change those laws to say that no representative of the people can take a gift? I spoke with a guy this week, and he was an auditor for the IRS, and he said they were on his butt all the time because of people taking a pen, a fountain pen, and yet the federal government and the state government takes gifts in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Transparency will settle a lot of things. If we can write some laws that make everything transparent to the citizens, I think that would correct a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think, I support transparency generally, but I think it can kind of be a false talisman or whatever you want to call it. One of the things that happens, well, the first principle I'll say is that the way you get around graft and corruption and rent seeking and all that stuff is, the solution to it is limited government under the rule of law. Not transparency, not campaign contribution limits, not gift bans. But I'm okay with gift bans. The transparency thing, what I was going to say is that what happens oftentimes, especially at the federal level, where they just because of its size, but the transparency laws produce such an avalanche of documents that you have no transparency because you can't find anything. So, you know, that's a problem, and it's kind of like, you know, someone once told me about how, you know, in medieval and later, basically up until maybe like 1900, the learning spread by word of mouth. But then we had this explosion of science, and there was, you could read about it in journals and stuff like that. But now we've gotten to the point where there's so many journals, so esoteric, you can't possibly read all of them. And once again, everybody learns about which are the important articles in those journals based on word of mouth. And so that's exactly kind of what happens. Well, it's worse than that because scientists actually have an incentive to go and like find out what the best things in their field are. But in the government situation, part of the reason why you create so many documents is to hide the ones you don't want people want to see. And so, you know, so that's a problem. So we really have to. Why is there so much? Why is Star Scientific giving so much money? It's because the governor has money in his discretionary fund. It's that he goes around shilling for particular companies. You know, that's if you have a company and you want the governor to mention your company, you're going to want to become his friend, right? And that is how the system creates the incentive for people to try to influence, to you know, give gifts to the governor, and it creates such a pressure on the governor to always be aware of what's going on. So I think the answer is, you know, partly laws on making gifts illegal, but if you make gifts illegal, they'll find other ways around it. Every law has a way around it, and so you have to focus on reducing the size of government, but especially reducing the discretion that the governor has to throw around money, reduce the amount of discretion that legislators have to create carve-outs for particular industries. So the rule of law, to me, is far more important than any particular transparency law.
I've heard recently that Obama's going to cut the corporate tax level effectively from 35 down to 28%. Would you be opposed to reducing or getting rid of the corporate tax rate in the state of Virginia to bring business into our area?
In Virginia, my ideal solution would be to get rid of a lot of the business taxes, and to get rid of both the personal and corporate income tax, to have a state sales tax that is uniform on all final sales of goods and services to
Yes.
I guess I don't need to keep talking.
Everyone faces the same.
But yeah, no, certainly, I mean, if you think about in a jobless recovery, where you have, say, you know, just take 5% income tax, just for a round number, and you get rid of that, now the employment decision, the cost of employment goes down for the employer. The employee, without reducing the take-home pay and likely increasing a little bit, that creates an atmosphere where employers are much more likely to hire somebody. So anytime that we tax labor, you get less of it. You know, companies will stick a machine there instead of a person, and that's why we have a recession with high unemployment but very high productivity, because it's very easy to substitute capital for labor.
One more. What would you do to reduce the entitlements in Virginia? And, you know, which way would you go with that?
Well, so I think that the most important thing is to have evidence-based policy that is not influenced by trying to sort of like, you know, solve the problems of particular groups. For every policy we have, we spend a certain amount of money. We'd be much better off focusing on the areas where public funds can have a very high return, or switching to cash subsidies, or you know, if the money is just being wasted, then getting rid of it entirely. So, you know, a lot of public programs are funded by the federal government through grants, and it's an obscene amount. I mean, if you take grants, federal grants to state and local governments, count that as one thing, it is on the order of our spending on defense, Medicare, Social Security. I mean, it's that big, and that's why, you know, they have us by the tail. You know, yeah. So I think there's a. Oh. Okay, sorry.
For about 20 minutes. I want to make a comment on what Bob said. It's nothing in the Constitution about marriage. But when the Constitution was drawn up, those men knew the law of the land was marriage between the man and the woman, so they didn't touch it. I'm not very highly educated. I learned coming along, 1 and 1 could make 3. Today, same as same-sex marriage, 1 and 1 will only make 2. And why is this thing so much pushing the same-sex marriage when AIDS is one of the biggest killers we've got in this country today, and it comes from that type of lifestyle? And when I get up in the morning, would I put on 2 right shoes to go to work? No way. I want a life and right. And you were speaking of freedom. God gave Adam and Eve freedom in the garden. They took that freedom, and this world's been in hell ever since.
Well, okay. So first of all, AIDS is not one of the top killers in the U.S., but it is a problem. So 50 years ago, and before I say this, I'm not saying that the race issue is the same as the
I was
sexual
81 years
orientation.
old, because I can tell you what was 51 years ago. We didn't have this problem then that we got today.
No, what I'm saying is I could not have been married 50 years ago to my wife, because in Virginia, the definition of marriage was a man and a woman of the same race. So it is not an argument. It is not an argument to recite the definition, the current definition. You have to have a substantive reason for maintaining that definition. So that's all I have to say, because, you know, just saying God said
If I could
this.
take the Bible and prove to what you just said, God said, don't be unequally yoked. If you enter in a marriage, that's unequally yoked. I'm deep into my Bible.
I have respect for that, but I don't understand your argument, and that's fine.
It's not an argument, it's a fact.
Okay, well, we can agree to disagree. I will say this, though. All I ask for is a vote. That's all I ask for. And there's no reason why we shouldn't have a vote. And I'll say, you know, well, that's all I'll say.
The Constitution states one nation under God. If there is no gray area there, none at all. And if we believe in the Constitution, we believe that it is a nation under God, and it was a Judeo-Christianity nation that was started here. And if we believe in the Constitution, we believe that it is one nation under God, and there would be no social issues arising. It's only when we start getting in gray areas that people want to change this concept. So as long as we believe that this nation is one nation under God, and we go by what we think that God wants, we're not going to have any of these social issues.
Well, I'm not aware of where the Constitution I would be happy to look at, if you can, you know, come talk to me afterwards and show me where it says that, you know.
It was endowed by our Creator. That was the words in the Constitution. We were endowed by our
The Declaration.
Creator.
The Declaration.
And the Creator is God.
Okay, but, well, I mean, I'm not gonna make this argument, belabor the argument, but first of all, I would say that the founders were products of the Enlightenment, not necessarily the Judeo-Christian, you know, some of them, most of them were.
Are you on the other side of the, or, you know, there is another side, what they call, what is it, the Parliament? That man that came and talked to us, and he was talking about, one side is the Judeo-Christian, and then there's the other side, and it was leaning, you know, it leans more to this side one time.
Well, I don't.
Do you remember what that?
Yeah, if I may, Ralph, forgive me for interrupting. You know, you have a belief system that is shared by the majority of people in this room, certainly by Christians. Then you have a matter of public policy. And I think that's where our founders said, we can evangelize and proselytize and try to convince a non-believer to come over to our side. But as a matter of public policy, the founders were very clear that if it was not addressed in the Constitution, then the states would remedy that. On that note, let me go back to a point that was made in some comments that Marnie alluded to, and that is the difference between Terry McAuliffe and Ken Cuccinelli. I wish I was better at conveying why we need to think in a new paradigm. If you're on a fast train to hell, or a train to hell that's going at half speed, you're still on a train to hell.
That's right, that's right.
And I am no longer willing to say, this guy is not as bad as this guy, when there is now 45 to 50 years of solid evidence, no matter what they say in a political campaign. The results have been what?
Disastrous.
More growth in government. Eric Cantor's going to come around next year and ask for your vote again. And I just ask you to make that judgment on this basis. Mr. Cantor will have been in Congress at that time, I guess it will be about 16 years. Now in that 16-year time frame,
As he shrunk government.
has this country gone further off the track or further towards correcting its problems? And judge him solely on that basis alone. So please, this guy's not as bad as the other guy, or this guy's more... Terry McAuliffe, if there is a God, someday that guy will be in prison, where I think he really belongs. That said, that alone is not justification to march off and line up behind Ken Cuccinelli, in my view. We had a very conservative governor 4 years ago, didn't we?
Oh, we did.
Conservative, all the bumper stickers I saw all over the state of Virginia. Conservative Bob McDonnell that stuck us with a $6 billion tax increase and funneled money into higher education by the truckload.
I do have a question. Yes. As one who has read a lot of bills in the General Assembly as part of the Tea Party effort, if you're governor, at best you'll have a 50-50 Senate and I guess a Republican House, hopefully. Those guys like to spend, they like the tax credits, and as everyone has mentioned. How are you going to guide or direct or bring them over to a more sensible approach that you advocate? Because the votes, I mean, they will vote for what they want.
Right.
I'm assuming, against your better advice.
There are a few ways you can control that. One is you can make sure that new legislation does as little harm as possible. The Virginia governor has a fairly strong veto power, including not just veto of whole bills, but of particular items. There is also the negotiation process with legislators. And like I said, I mean, I think that a third-party governor can do a lot more than a major party governor, because as soon as you get one party in that office, all the legislators on the other side dig in their heels. So you can get the good things from each of the parties without the bad things from either one. Also, I'm going to appoint, everybody I appoint is going to share my views of the proper role of the law, the proper role of government, and you know, every power that is open to reconsideration, or every regulation or law in the administrative agencies is open to you know, enforcement or even revision is going to be looked at.
Defunding.
What's that?
Defunding certain departments.
Right. Well, all of that, you know, I can't make promises that X, Y, and Z will happen because I have to deal with the legislature. But absolutely, if there aren't things that I believe that the government should be spending money on, then, you know, that's my role as governor is to make sure that we do as little of that as possible.
This gentleman over here, Rob, has his hand up.
One of the problems that I have seen, I'm fairly young, but one of the problems that I've seen over the years is people talk about transparency. I have yet been able to find where we pay for taxes for gas, where that pot is and how much is in that pot, and then how much we spend on our roads. So as governor, would you be willing to make that transparent? So we can actually see the different pots, and people can actually see the pots, and they can say, oh, okay, well, I'm spending this much money for this. Okay, well, I think we should spend more, or something like that. So we're at least have a better idea of what's going on, instead of having it all thrown in one pot, and nobody knows what's happening to it then.
Right. So there are a couple different problems with the way we do it currently, transportation. One of it is that, you know, the transportation fund, as a proportion of what we need to fund roads has decreased because the gas tax was set at a number, not a percent, and so other funds from that don't go into the transportation fund go towards transportation, and that stuff is much harder to keep track of, and to, you know, so we're moving further away from gas taxes and towards sales taxes that go into the general fund, and we don't even know if those tax increases are going to go to transportation. I think it's very likely that much of it won't, but, you know, I think most people understand at some intuitive level that it makes much more sense to have the costs of a service or infrastructure paid for by the people who use it. What people don't like, though, is when you put up a road that has a toll on it and you're not reducing their taxes. So now they're paying for it and they're funding other things that they don't need to be funding.
We have time for one more question. Bonnie?
I worked in the state of California for their Medicaid program, and even at the state level, all the politicians that they want to give, I work for the drug program, they want to give drugs to everyone. It's the same kind of thing, give goodies to everyone for the votes. And then, but the thing is, they had it where if they can get it from the federal government, they get lots of funds from the federal government. So if they can get money from the federal government, it's like, we'll try to approve these drugs because the federal government will pay for it. So, but it's like the federal government, you know, they can print money because, you know, the Federal Reserve and all that, you know, all about that. You're an economist, but so it's kind of like since the federal government, they can print money like that and just bait the states like that. I mean, how would you? I mean, even at the state level, you know, and they have limited funds, they have to balance their budget, but they have to, they still want to give things to everyone, and then they have at the federal level, they're depending on them, because they have, like, infinite, money they can give them. So how would you escape from that whole trap?
Yeah, that happens in a lot of different areas. Another one is disability, with the unemployment insurance and those kind of programs that come out of state directed funds. And those come from the federal government oftentimes into the state pot, but then the state pot, they'll try to protect the state pot by seeking out people who can be pushed to the disability program instead, and that's directed from the federal government. So there's no good solution other than a radical retrenchment of a total revision of how we do government, especially at the federal level. Because there's, and one thing we have to do is to try and get some mechanism by which states can influence federal policy. You don't want it to be too, make it so that nothing can get done, but you want to make it so that, their proposals for like a 2/3 vote of the state legislatures can undo federal legislation. I mean, that's a pretty high bar, but it at least